Fox News alert, brand new Fox News Opinion Dynamics poll on the immigration issue, showing 50% of Americans favor Arizona's new immigration law, despite the Obama administration's determination to stop it. 50% now, which is down slightly from June when it was at 52%. We are also seeing live protests in downtown Phoenix today. We saw some arrests last hour as the situation out there is anything but calm in the wake of yesterday's ruling. Joining me now, constitutional attorney and radio talk show host Mark Levine. He's also a former attorney for the House Judiciary Committee. And Mark, now as we see in the wake of this ruling, an appeal up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals from the governor of Arizona, and the people have taken to the streets to demonstrate in opposition to the ruling and in opposition to what has been left standing of that law. Neither side is happy today.
Well, I think you'll find that there's much more reaction against the law and in support of that decision than vice versa. It's interesting, the polls you showed, it showed, as you pointed out, that as Americans learned that the law is unconstitutional, something I've been predicting on your show for many months now.
Well, in fairness, they weren't asked why they went from 52% to 50%.
Well, and as you had polls showing as high as 70 at one point. I think Americans are learning more and more about the law as it comes out, as people understand that Arizona can't have a different law from New Mexico, a different law from California. We are one nation. We have one federal immigration policy. I think that you'll see support for the law decrease. But the thing that I find most interesting, though, is that you have far more opponents of the law protesting than supporters. And that tells me that the intensity against the law. Well, you look at all the protests. Look at the protest that you have on your camera is mostly opponents of the law.
How do you know that? I don't know that, and I'm watching the same video you are. I don't know. Well, I don't want to characterize it one way or the other because I just don't know.
You've shown that vast majority of protests on the state are against the law. That's been true for several months now. It's because there's an intensity. It's true that more Americans support the law than oppose it, but those that oppose it do so intensely because, let's face it, Latino Americans know that they're going to be targeted. And that's why they and Americans that don't want innocent Americans to be targeted oppose the law and support the decision today.
But my question for you, Mark, is that, you still have, that's 50%, according to our Fox News polling, who support the law. And the numbers are higher in Arizona, as you know. And the question for you is, even though obviously the Department of Justice scored a legal victory yesterday in part, will the Obama administration live to regret that legal victory come the midterm elections? In other words, will those 50% who approve of this law, and even higher numbers in Arizona, want to hold somebody accountable when it comes time to vote?
Well, I don't think Americans should hold the president accountable for upholding the Constitution. The president of the United States takes an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And when people see a president that supports polls over principle, most Americans say, you know what? I think the Constitution should trump polls. President Obama took a very courageous stand. He knew the polls were against him, but he also knew that he had to uphold the Constitution. He did the right thing, whether or not it was popular. I think at the end of the day, Americans understand if you don't like the law, change the law, but don't violate the law.
I want to just point out, because I'm just being told that Trace Gallagher had information earlier that some of these folks who are protesting the law in Phoenix were bussed in from Los Angeles. So that, those are some of the opponents from Los Angeles who were apparently witnessing here, but there are some within Arizona who don't like the law either.
But
nonetheless,
what does it tell you, Megyn?
Yeah, go ahead.
It tells you that people are willing to go from out of state. They oppose this law so strongly. They're actually willing to bus, quite a long bus ride. You don't see as many supporters doing it. It tells you the intensity of the opposition is strong.
And yet, Mark, there's still a lot of questions about Judge Bolton's ruling. And I know you're a constitutional attorney, and I myself am an attorney. And what I found interesting in her ruling was she said it's not okay to mandate that police officers who have reasonable suspicion of somebody's illegal status, it's not okay to force them to ask everybody whether they're illegal, but they can do it if they so desire. And
that's correct.
So there is nothing to stop the police out in Arizona, every single one of them, from stopping people for whom they have reasonable suspicion that they're an illegal and asking those questions.
Except that, Megyn, most police, the vast majority of them, use discretion, and they should have that discretion. Arizona was trying to take away that discretion. Arizona was trying to say that if you or I, Megyn, are driving through Arizona and we're stopped for speeding, that they're required to check our immigration status.
If there's reasonable suspicion. If there's reasonable suspicion.
No one could define what that reasonable suspicion was, and in the law it said if you're arrested,
That's not true.
You're required to check.
That's not true. That's not true that no one could define what reasonable suspicion
the governor
meant.
couldn't. Here's Governor Jan Brewer was asked.
Well, the law
how do you know if
specifically
there's
said,
reasonable suspicion?
the law specifically tried to touch on this and said it couldn't be based on race. They wouldn't allow racial profiling. But now we're retreading ground that we've been over before. But my point to you is, now we can have a situation. I mean, yes, she struck down the part that says all of these cops must do it if they have a reasonable suspicion, but all of these police officers still can do it. And so how does that get to the judge's concern? Because her concern was you can't have ICE overwhelmed with all these phone calls from cops out in Arizona saying, I think this one's an illegal, and I think this one's an illegal. Well, how is her problem solved? Because now you're still going to have a lot of sheriffs out there, Sheriff Joe Arpaio and others like him, who are still going to be calling ICE saying, I think this one's an illegal, and I think this one is too. And ICE could still be overwhelmed.
Well, that wasn't the judge's concern. The judge's concern was that Arizona was going beyond federal law.
No, she also spoke. No, Mark. She also spoke to the issue of overburdening the federal government.
Well, that's correct, because the federal law gives discretion to police officers to decide who they think they should turn in and who not. Arizona law took the discretion away. They said every single person arrested in Arizona, and you could be a 10th-generation American, if you're arrested in Arizona, even if you know the guy and you know where he was born, you got to call up the federal authorities and make sure he's not illegal.
That's not true. You keep saying that, and it's not true. It is true.
I can read you from the opinion, Megyn. I'll tell you what.
No, let me just make my point, and then you can respond.
All right.
The law said, and I know you're going to agree with me on this, this is an accurate statement of the law. If you have a legal stop of somebody, i.e. a traffic stop or so on, and on top of that, you have a reasonable suspicion that they may be here illegally, then you must report. But you're forgetting that second requirement of reasonable suspicion. You keep saying that what you just said was, even if I know where you were born, I can demand your paper. That's not true. You had to have a reasonable suspicion that the person wasn't illegal.
Megyn, there are two sentences in Section 2. What you're quoting from is Sentence 1, that it says if you have a lawful stop, then you need reasonable suspicion. Sentence 2 says if you are arrested, then you must check. And the judge made it very clear that Sentence 2 wasn't dependent on Sentence 1. She devoted several pages of her opinion to it to note that every single person who's arrested, you must check whether an illegal alien or not, even if you have no reason to think so. And she thought that was overburdensome. The federal government didn't want it, and that's one of the things she struck down. So you're right about Sentence 1, but Sentence 2 is what I'm talking about.
All right. I got to let that be the last word because we're out of time. Mark, I appreciate you coming on. All the best.
Thank you, Megyn.